I got my start as a lawyer representing cyclists back in 2005, defending cyclists against the NYPD crackdown following the critical mass rides that disrupted the Republican National Convention here in New York City back in 2004. It was a years-long campaign by NYPD that involved basically dragnet tactics of anyone who was on two wheels got dragged in, got charged with some offense. It may have had nothing to do with anything. They just rounded them up, kettled, they called it, and brought them in and arrested them and sometimes detained them in jail for extensive periods of time. We had mixed results from that campaign, but what I learned back then is that NYPD is an extremely blunt instrument of social change in the hands of government here in New York, especially when what you're trying to do is change the behavior of cyclists, because there's unfortunately substantial animosity between many police officers towards cyclists, and frankly, between some cyclists against the NYPD. So it's a very volatile mixture. And I had reason to reflect on this recently because we're at it again. We're now at 20 years later in 2025, and I've been litigating against NYPD in a variety of different contexts all this time. We've got this new quality of life initiative where NYPD is sending cyclists to criminal court supposedly for violating traffic rules. Ordinarily, and when it comes to motorists and pedestrians, you violate a traffic rule, you go to traffic court, or you don't even go. You just pay your ticket, and that's it. There's no other consequences. There's no consequence to your residency status in the United States if you're a non-citizen. You don't have to take a day off from work and go into court. Maybe your insurance premiums will go up. They probably should if you're committing a lot of traffic violations, but you don't go to criminal court and face those consequences where your life could be ruined depending on your status and how things turn out. Well, under this new quality of life initiative announced just last week as they started to implement it, supposedly we are cracking down on commercial delivery cyclists who are discourteous and dangerous and not obeying the law as they deliver things around New York City. Well, there's a reason there's so many delivery cyclists rushing around and cutting corners. And let's not forget that reason is, number one, we are ordering them to come and bring us our prepared food, our groceries, our weed, and whatever else. Number two, they're doing it through these apps that have controlled delivery service now in a way that they didn't before. A mere 10 years ago, there were no apps that were the way you got food delivered to your home. There were stores that had their own bike delivery forces, and through the stores, we had accountability because those store owners would be responsible if their 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 delivery cyclists were breaking the law. First of all, people wouldn't patronize that business. Second of all, the businesses were getting the fines. We had a good regulatory framework, and this whole thing was disrupted by apps like DoorDash, Uber Eats, Caviar, a number of others that have now completely controlled and cornered food delivery. I have a Chinese restaurant in my neighborhood where I walked in to try to order a pint of vegetable lo mein, and they say, we don't take orders at this window. Use your phone. Okay, so the apps control this, and they are directing the cyclists to do things that are illegal, all right? And this is what's driving it. So ostensibly, New York City needs a quality of life initiative, and because these delivery cyclists, we're told, aren't showing up for the traffic tickets they get in traffic court because the traffic court judges can't issue bench warrants to make you a wanted person if you don't show up, New York just said, oh, well then let's make them criminal court summonses because the criminal court judges can issue bench warrants. And they can go in and pick up your ass and drag you into criminal court and put you in jail if you don't show up and answer for your misconduct. Well, there's a problem with this. Number one, the criminal courts do not have jurisdiction of simple traffic violations. Number two, the consequences and the burdens of going to criminal court are far more severe, and it is unfair to impose them on people who merely commit traffic violations. But then there's a whole other bunch of problems with this, right? Number three, NYPD doesn't know the law as it applies to cyclists, and NYPD is issuing criminal court summonses to cyclists who go through white walk signals while the vehicular circular red signal is red. That's been legal in New York City since 2019, and my law firm has been litigating that issue to make NYPD follow the law as written now for over 5 years, and they're still not doing it. So NYPD doesn't know the law to enforce it, and they're dragging people in who are lawfully going through white walk signals because they don't know that that's the law now. That's number one. Number two, they're going after people who aren't even on e-bikes, which was ostensibly the target of this program. They're going after regular pedal cyclists, which, as far as I know, haven't been the source of the outcry that we need to regulate commercial delivery cyclists more, which is one that I'm sympathetic to because I see the need for heightened regulation, especially for commercial e-bike delivery operators. Number three, the cops and the animosity between cops and cyclists is just flowering in the most grotesque way in these encounters that we see under a quality of life initiative. You have cops stepping abruptly into the bike lane in the path of a cyclist coming down off the bridge at a high rate of speed, a lawful rate, but 20, 25 miles an hour coming off the bridge. The cop steps right into the path of the cyclist and says, halt. And if the cyclist can't stop in time, well, they disobeyed a lawful order and they violated the right of way of a pedestrian, which is a joke because pedestrians don't have a right of way to abruptly step into a bike lane. And if the cyclist gets upset in the adrenaline rush from having almost been thrown off their bike by making an emergency stop maneuver in those circumstances, well, the cop's gonna write him up for disorderly conduct. They're doing it. Resisting arrest, obstructing government administration, all these bullshit charges that police like to give to people who don't just take it with a smile when the cop unfairly tickets them. So we have these encounters that are bubbling over and turning into actual confrontations that do involve criminal charges. And they're being precipitated, provoked, and escalated by NYPD officers who are just going rogue and not doing anything to implement this policy. If you want to change people's behavior in a place like New York, it's pretty simple how you do it, right? You tell people what's the conduct you're trying to change. You tell them how you want them to change it. You put out a very clear message of what you want them to do and when you're going to start enforcement. You go through a period of warning people first, maybe just a week or two, and then you start enforcing it in a rational, even-handed manner. What did NYPD do in this case? They said, we're trying to stop commercial e-bike delivery operators from violating certain laws, and then they just pointed the police at the cycling community the way they've always done since 2005 to the present and said, get them. It's a community punishment approach, which is absolutely unfair. It violates the constitutional rights of the cyclists, in some cases who are doing absolutely nothing illegal, in other cases may be committing a traffic violation, but should not be in the criminal court's jurisdiction, and in fact are not within the criminal court's jurisdiction. And then it is jeopardizing people who may have a questionable citizenship status. And they may have been born here, but birthright citizenship is one of the things on the list. If you're here working in tech or as an artist, as a student on a visa, there's so many people here in New York who are from outside of the country who are drawn to New York for a variety of reasons and what we have to offer. And now we're going to give those people a criminal record when what that means is very much up in the air and becoming increasingly more frightening every day when we see what the federal government is doing. You know, we are ruining lives by this dragnet approach with the NYPD creating fake crimes, creating criminals, creating encounters where the tempers boil over and turn into violent confrontations, potentially even physically violent confrontations. You know, is this really the way to deal with a problem in behavior with our enormous delivery workforce who's delivering all of our stuff? I don't think so. There's got to be another way. And we're seriously considering bringing a suit in federal court to stop this quality of life initiative before it ruins more lives.